Hello everybody and welcome to this short video on an introduction to amateur radio in the United Kingdom. My name's Mike and I'm an amateur radio operator and my call sign is M0XMX. Before we get into it, let me just explain this is aimed to be a high level introduction to amateur radio. It's not meant to be technical. So, over the last year or so that I've been involved in amateur radio, people have said to me, so what's so great about it? Why is it a good hobby? Well, the good thing about it, what I like, is the fact that it's enjoyed by many, many different people. So children, men, women, particularly what it does do is it offers people to interact in social ways that maybe they wouldn't be able to do otherwise. Maybe people that are housebound or elderly, it just gives them that ability to be able to talk to people maybe that they wouldn't be able to talk to otherwise. There's many different aspects of the hobby that people enjoy, and it really is as wide as it is deep. So you can actually use the hobby to experiment in all sorts of different ways. There are people out there that enjoy making radios from nothing more than a design in their head or maybe something that they've downloaded off the internet. Antenna construction, understanding the differences between an antenna that's at 5 meters and an antenna that's at 10 meters, how that propagates and all sorts of stuff like that. And also digital modes, you know, the ability for two radios to be able to talk to each other, but maybe using digital transmission, a bit like a fax machine, for instance. So yeah, there's a lot to the hobby to keep you excited. So the first step is to listen. So for many, many years people have listened to conversations, and there's something exciting about hearing a conversation that maybe not everybody else can hear. In no way am I saying that it's right to listen to conversations that you shouldn't listen to, okay? But amateur radio is open and it's there to be listened to, and people who listen to those kind of conversations are classed as short wave listeners, or SWL as it's affectionately known, and it's been enjoyed by many, many people over many, many, many years. So the easiest way to get into shortwave listening is to buy a scanner. So like we can see here, here's a couple of examples. There's a handheld scanner or a base station scanner. Handheld probably is the most convenient because it's all in one. It's got rechargeable batteries and it's got an integral antenna, and you can take it wherever you want to go, whereas a base station is bigger and it will probably need an antenna installing, but equally it's better for people who struggle to be able to see the small numbers and wherever. So yeah, whichever is the best suited for your purposes. When it comes to getting a scanner, then obviously you switch it on and it's got all of these frequencies available to you, and many of these scanners can receive all sorts of different frequencies and whatever. Where do you start? You know, what do I turn to? So in amateur radio speak, different blocks of frequencies are referred to in terms of bands, okay, B-A-N-D-S. And here's an example of that. So as we can see there, we've got UHF, VHF and HF. UHF is ultra high frequency, then very high frequency, and then high frequency. So if we can see there, the 2 meter band operates on a frequency of 144 to 148 megahertz. And equally 10 meters 28 to 29.7, 40 meters is 7 to 7.2. okay, so there's just an idea of some of the frequencies that you may or may not hear amateur radio traffic on. You've been listening and you think, right, I want to start to talk now. So before you can do that, it's important to understand that before you can start transmitting, you need to get a license, and that license is issued by Ofcom in the UK. And before you can get that license, you need to take an exam and pass the exam, and it's normal that you would take that exam at your local amateur radio club. There's a link there to the RSGB's website. The RSGB is the Radio Society of Great Britain, and it's also normal before you take your exam that you'll do some kind of training, and most of those clubs will also help you with that. Most of them run training courses. So there are 3 training courses which are basically geared around the 3 licence levels. The licence levels being Foundation, Intermediate and Full. The Foundation is aimed at being an introduction. It's aimed to be passable by the majority of people. That's it. They will teach you the basics of what you need to know in order to be able to operate safely and not be able to cause interference or avoid interference with other people. The Intermediate gets a little bit more involved and teaches you a fair bit more technical information, and the Full licence, or the Advanced as some people refer to it, is, how shall I put it, very thorough. I'm not going to say it's difficult, because there are some people out there that could pass it very, very easily. Me, I had to really work at it. So yeah, different privileges come with each licence, such as more power. First things first, it's important to understand that you don't need your licence, you don't need to have passed your licence in order to buy the equipment. Okay, you only need the licence in order to be able to transmit. Okay, so there's nothing to stop you from buying the equipment and installing the equipment and using it to listen but not transmit. So my advice would be, purchase the equipment, maybe get a local amateur to come over and help you test it and make sure it works okay, and then unplug the microphone and put the microphone somewhere safe, so that number 1, you're not tempted to use it, and number 2, it doesn't get used by accident. So, but before you actually go out and buy the equipment, there's a few considerations that you just need to get straight. So number 1, where are you going to use the radio? Is it going to be used in the car? Is it going to be used portable, carrying it around? Is it going to be used in the home? Also, another important consideration is, what's your budget? It's important to try and put a budget on this, because just like any hobby, you can get carried away and it can end up costing you a significant amount of money, more than you first imagined. So set yourself a budget in the early days and then see where you go from there. Also, you need to understand, are you able to mount an antenna? So if you're putting it in your home, are you physically able to climb up onto the roof and put an antenna up there? Okay. Also, you need to take into consideration the location. Okay, you could be in an area of natural beauty where they don't allow antennas, or the neighbours might not enjoy having an antenna on your roof. Also, you need to consider what bands, what frequencies are you looking to use, and we'll cover that in a second. So in terms of portable, this is the simplest and most convenient of all. So a little handheld, handy talkie, like that Yaesu FT60 there, is great. Most amateur radio operators has at least one handheld radio. The great thing about handhelds is you can take them anywhere and everywhere. They've normally got a rechargeable battery, normally a built-in antenna, and typically for a little radio like that you'll pay around about £100. Maybe you're looking at installing it into the car. Not as simple as obviously a portable radio. It's definitely a DIY job, but it will require, you know, obviously cabling to get the power to the radio and also to the antenna. Typical cost maybe £200, depending on the type of radio and the type of antenna, but £200 is a good place to start. And if you're using it in the house, well, there's a few other things to take into consideration. This is where the cost really would start at around about £200. You're going to need a power supply. Typically radios are 12 volts, so in order to power it in the home, you're going to need a power supply. There's maybe £70-ish, and also obviously the antenna and the radio, but also the cable to connect the antenna to the radio. Obviously it's a lot further away, and cable, you know, good quality cable isn't cheap. Also, if you are struggling getting the antenna up onto the roof, just remember the local TV aerial fitter will always help you with that. Bear in mind in terms of the location, you may need planning permission from the council, so keep that in mind. And also it's always a good idea to keep the neighbours on board. Maybe a knock on the door just saying, you know, I'm thinking about doing this, is that okay? Rather than putting the antenna up and then expecting them to say, yeah, that's okay. Okay, so the other consideration is what bands are you going to use, what frequencies. Different bands offer different attractions and challenges and abilities. And the first thing to consider is antennas. So typically, the higher the frequency, the shorter the antenna. Okay, so we talked about the bands earlier on, and we talked about HF and VHF and UHF. So a VHF antenna for 2 meters, for instance, this is mine, this is for my little handheld. This is 2 meters, and this is around about 8 centimeters long. Equally, I've got a 2 meter antenna on my roof that is 5.2 meters long. So yeah, it's a general statement when I say that typically a 2 meter antenna could be a few inches, or it could be between 1 and 2 meters. Okay, there's always exceptions. Typically, again, a 40 meter antenna will be 20 meters long, and an 80 meter antenna will be 40 meters long, generally speaking. As I say, lots of exceptions. Okay, so we've worked out what we want, and now we need to go out and buy some equipment. Okay, this is the fun bit, when we actually get to go out and spend some money on something with flashing lights. So the different bands, as I say, have got different attractions, but we also need to bear in mind that the radios kind of go up in price the more features that they've got. So generally, you've got the choices of 2 or 3 different band capabilities, let's call it that. So you could go out and buy a 2 meter only radio. That would be relatively cost effective. Or even a 2 meter and 70 centimeter radio. So that's VHF and UHF, okay? Relatively cost effective. Less than a couple of £100 would buy you a very good one. You might decide that you want HF, okay? So HF only covers typically 10 meters up to 80 or maybe even 160 meters. You could also go out and buy what we call a shack in a box, or an all band, all mode radio, which would cover maybe 70 centimeters all the way up to 80 or 160 meters. Okay, and the picture there of the FT991 is a good example of a shack in a box. The different bands, as I say, the part of the attraction with using HF as opposed to VHF is distance, and a lot of people get a lot of enjoyment out of talking to what we call DX stations, many thousands of miles away. Okay, now typically that's HF, that's high frequency. That's a challenge on VHF or UHF. They're not; those bands are really not suitable for that kind of distance. VHF and UHF typically tends to be 20 to 30 miles. And also it's important to remember that different bands work differently at different times of the day with different atmospheric conditions and stuff like that. So a band that might be brilliant in the afternoon might be, well, absolutely dead in the evening. So just bear in mind things like that. And some bands attract what we call nets, or local chat rooms. People maybe with a common interest meet together every day or every week to talk about stuff. Okay, so again, you can find things like that on the HF bands. You can also use what we call repeaters, which gives you the ability for me, sat here in, let's say, Nottingham, to talk into a repeater in Birmingham, and then that repeater would take my signal and repeat it further afield. So I could actually, instead of having a conversation with someone 30 miles away, I could be having a conversation with somebody through the repeater of maybe 70 miles away. In addition to that, we've also got digital radio. So this is the newest technology really when you think about it. So me with my radio, I can talk and it will get converted into the internet, and then it will go through the internet and pop out somewhere else and get converted back into radio. And it's not uncommon, sat here in Nottingham, to hear people from Africa and Australia and New Zealand talking on these digital bands. So what to do next? If you're interested, the first thing to do is to find your local club. There's a link there to the RSGB's website, the Radio Society of Great Britain, where you can find your local club. You'll also find loads and loads and loads of information on places like Facebook and Google and YouTube. So there's a couple of links just to a couple of Facebook pages, but there's lots and lots more. So yeah, go and have a look and hunt out the ones that suit your style. If it is time to buy, just bear in mind new equipment is widely available from lots of very, very good radio shops around the UK. Most of the suppliers offer a delivery service at reasonable pricing. Also bear in mind that used equipment can be a very, very good way to get a bargain. I've bought probably all of my equipment, well, all of my radios used. Just be careful, you know, try and research who you're buying from. All of the local sources for buying stuff, you know, eBay, Gumtree, local selling groups, but also don't rule out Facebook, because there are quite a few Facebook amateur radio selling groups. And also club members, yeah, if you're going to go to your local club, talk to the club members, ask who's selling what. Very often, you know, buying from a club member is virtually a guarantee that you're going to get a good sound used radio. So here's some useful links for you. So these are some Facebook selling groups. There's one called Ham Radio Deals. There's one called Radio Classifieds. There's one called HF Radios for sale, and another one called Hatfield Communications. The URLs that I post as well, rather than being really, really long URLs, these have just been shortened to short URLs through Google. But I guarantee that they're all fine. They're not taking you off to some dodgy website somewhere. Yeah, before we close, just a little bit about me. My name's Mike Lewis, and I'm 50. I live in Burton-on-Trent, which is in the centre of the United Kingdom. And in the early days, I played CB when I was in my teens, when it had just become legalised. I've had a marine VHF licence for many years because of my interest in boats. And back in February 2016, I bought a scanner, and that got me interested in amateur radio. And then in September 2016, I joined my local club, Burton Amateur Radio Club, and I got my first call sign, having done a bit of training, and I got my first call sign in October 16, and that was M6OML. I started studying straight away for my intermediate, my goal being to get that for Christmas, and I got that on the 23rd of December, 2E0EZG, so I was really, really pleased with that. And then come January I started studying again, this time on a proper course through Bath and District Amateur Radio Club, on a distance learning course, and I passed my advanced training and got my full call sign, which is the one that I keep now for life, M0XMX, in June 2017. And I think that's just proof that it's possible. You know, I'm not an RF engineer, I'm not an electronics expert or anything like that. I'm a salesman. So yeah, if I can do it just by putting in a bit of time and a bit of effort and a bit of commitment, then I think that just goes to show that anybody can. So there you go. Thanks a lot for sticking with me. I hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to drop me a line, please feel free. There's my email address. And if you'd like to check out any of the videos on my YouTube channel, then there's the link for that. So again, thanks a lot for your time. Sorry the video's gone on a little bit longer than I planned, but yeah, hopefully it's been okay. Take care, and 7-3 for now. Bye bye.